Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. It's an honor. Thank you, Michael, for allowing me to be here. Thank you, folks, for being here, and all you folks out there watching. The first thing I want to do, though, because we've already been kind of introduced that this is not just another meeting. This is not just another time to get together. We are living in very serious and very perilous times. And so our Father in heaven is, I believe, speaking to His people, wanting to awaken His people. You know, the Yom Teruah is a day of memorial of blowing of trumpets. It is to call our attention to the blowing of these trumpets. And I understand that in part, what that is about is to awaken us from our slumber, as Paul put it. And primarily, God's people are who are being addressed. So the first thing that I would like to do is, if you'll join me, is to go to the Father in prayer and just ask His Spirit to lead and guide what is spoken here. Amen? Our Father in heaven, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we are grateful, Father, that You have allowed us the opportunity, the privilege, but also given us the responsibility to gather together at these appointed times. And as we do, we look to You to speak. We look to You to guide us. We call upon You to direct us by Your Spirit. And so the things that I will share today, first of all, I pray that You'll give me the clarity of mind to do it in a way that is faithful to You and to Your Word. And I pray, Father, that more than the words of man, that people will hear Your word within the words. They will hear Your message within the message. And so that when all is said and done, we will not just attain more information, but that You will impart into us revelation that can only come to us by Your Spirit. And we pray these things in the name of the Messiah, our Redeemer and King, Yeshua. Amen and amen. All right, well, my goal here today is to share a message. I'm going to have two parts that we're going to do it in. And the background of the message is this. I've been part of what we'll call Hebrew roots or Messianic or whatever label you'd like to put on it. I mean, we go from different things and we call ourselves all these different things. And frankly, I'm just a believer trying to live by this book as He gives me guidance. So whatever that is, that's what I am. But I've been involved with trying to understand the Hebrew roots of the faith for close to 30 years now. And so I've been around long enough to know that I don't know everything. And I've been around long enough to know that there are a lot of people out there who've not been at it as long as I have, who think they know everything. And maybe you've met some of these people. I'm sure you have. As I was sharing with someone just a little bit ago, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. And so for me, it's coming back around to some of the basic principles of the faith. So the background to my message is I'm kind of going along, doing my thing and teaching and trying to learn more and trying to understand what it is that the Creator wants me to do and what He wants me to be. I'm realizing that He's been putting the squeeze on me. That's the best way I know how to put it. He's been putting the squeeze on me. I feel like a grape between His fingers, if I can use this analogy. And He's squeezing that grape, not harshly, but firmly. And so as I'm being squeezed, what's on the inside is coming to the outside. And some of it's good, and some of it is not so good. But I'm realizing that He's not doing this to destroy, to demean, but He's doing it for my benefit. He allows us to be chastened, the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 12, for our profit, that we may be partakers of His holiness. And so what I'm leading up to is this. We all know and understand that we are living in very, very perilous, very ominous times. We can see the different indicators out in the world, all the things that are going on through the nations and in this nation as well. And we can understand that judgment, as Michael was sharing with us earlier, judgment is at hand. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the next day, but judgment is at hand. And it is sometimes our tendency as believers to deflect the impact of that that reality off of us and project it onto everybody else. In other words, He's getting ready to judge them. He's getting ready to judge them, which, okay, I don't have any problems with that, except we need to be reminded that if He's getting ready to judge all these people out here, then it's going to start with me, and it's going to start with you, and it's going to start with us. He judges His house first, thus the squeezing. So it's with that in mind that I want to get into a problem that has affected God's people from the beginning, really. And that is, in spite of what we've experienced, in spite of what we've learned, and in spite of what we have seen, we have this tendency at large to reject what the Father presents to us, what He offers to us, in deference to what looks good to us and what appeals to us. And so it starts all the way back in the beginning. In the garden, there are those two trees, the one that renders a fruit that if you eat it, you live, and the other that has the appearance of being good, but's inherently evil as well. And so we came to look at that tree as being pleasant to the eye, good for food, and it was a tree desirable to make one wise. And that's stuck with me over the last few years, because there are a lot of people, a lot of God's people, who are on a pursuit for knowledge. You see, at the beginning, the adversary's tactic was not to seduce with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But don't you want to know everything there is to know? More or less, that's what he was saying. God just knows that you eat of this tree, you'll be like Him, knowing good from evil. And so somewhere in there, it was this desire to know things. Now, that being said, we all want to learn. But the thing is, knowledge in and of itself has a tendency to do what? To puff us up. And when we get puffed up, we go from a relational experience with the Creator to a religious experience with the Creator. And I think, and I haven't known Michael very long. I've known about him for a long time, but we've only recently met and got acquainted. But the one thing that has stuck with me about Michael Rood is that he's not interested in religion. I got that. And he has this unique way of making that point. But what I appreciated about him is that, and I saw this as we shared and we talked, that he is interested in having a relationship with the Creator. Because he and we should understand that the Creator wishes to have a relationship with us. And so we can't afford to get bogged down in knowledge in and of itself, because sometimes, as we've seen, that quest for knowledge will cause us to turn away from the tree of life to embrace a tree that looks good. But if we embrace that, and if it becomes a religious experience, and that's all it is, it renders death. But we didn't learn our lesson after the garden. We continued, as God's people, to make this same mistake. We have a tendency to reject what God offers us in deference to what we want. Like some examples. We want to be like the nations, and so we want a king. And so He gave them a king. In fact, literally head and shoulders, like a guy who stood head and shoulders above everybody else. Because let's face it, a little short, squirmy dude wouldn't have been very appealing to the eye, would it? So we want someone who looks like a strong man. We want someone who is, we can put our confidence in, that we feel like this is going to be a great leader. But as we learn, the Creator does not look on the outward appearance as man does, but He looks on the heart. So once again, God's people give us an example of how we will reject what He has for us because we want what we want. And ultimately, we see this in the Messiah. The Messiah comes, but He's rejected because people were looking for other things. But now I want to go to the Scripture and give you what is where we're going to start in the Bible to kind of make this point. And it's in Numbers chapter 11. I'm going to read a few verses here, beginning at verse 4. It says, "Now the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to intense craving, so the children of Israel also wept and said, 'Who will give us meat to eat?'" Now, I'm not here to get into who the mixed multitude were. I have some opinions, but the point is this. Whoever the mixed multitude were, gave into intense craving and had the ability, apparently, to influence God's people, the children of Israel, to also give in to that intense craving. And so my point here would be, God's people, are we to impact and influence the world in which we live? Or are we to coast through life and just don't make any waves and allow the world to influence us? Well, obviously it's the other way around. But look around us and the condition of the body at large, not just the Messianics, not just the Hebrew roots people, but the body at large. Would it be fair to say that the body is influencing the world in which we live or allowing the world to influence us? Well, then I'm going to suggest to you that in some ways, the mixed multitude giving into their intense craving has, again, influenced the children of Israel to give into that craving as well, so that we want what we want. Who's going to give us meat to eat, they said. We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up. There is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes, this bread that falls from heaven 6 days out of 7, and we have a double portion on the 6th day. Here's Bill's understanding of this, what they were really getting at. We're bored with this. We're tired of this. This is all we have. We want meat. And so we continue to read in verse 18 that the Creator says to Moses, "Then you shall say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat." And so here's something else we learn. There are many times that God will give His people what they want, like the king they wanted. He gave them a king. How did that turn out? Not so well. He will give His people what they want, but why? To demonstrate to them what they wanted was not what they needed. These people were looking backward at what they had been accustomed to, what they grew up in. As far as we know, not one person that left Egypt for the land of Canaan, including Moses, was born in the land of Canaan. As far as we know, they were all born in Egypt. That's what they were familiar with. That's the culture that they were exposed to. And for a good time, they prospered in that culture. They thrived, they grew, they multiplied in Egypt or Mitzrayim. But there come a time then things changed. There was a new administration. That administration began to institute policies that were designed to keep the people of God subjected to His rule and His authority. And Egypt began to squeeze them, which is interesting because Mitzrayim, Egypt, comes from the Hebrew word that means to squeeze, for pressure. But, of course, when they left, and in Numbers 11, they are looking back. They're thinking about the way things used to be. Wow, we had fresh fish. We had cucumbers. We had this. We had that. We had Leave It to Beaver. We had Ronald Reagan. We had all of those things. I mean, is there anybody here looking around what's going on in our country today would like for things to go back to the way they used to be? But if we look back to what it used to be, how far are we willing to go and allow the culture to influence us to get what we want? Keeping in mind that what we want might not be what we need. And so to get what we want, we start justifying why it's okay to turn away from the tree of life and embrace the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We begin to justify things that in any other circumstance we would not. Because you see, when we want what we want, we'll find all kinds of ways to get it. And so they wanted the fresh fish. They wanted the melons, the cucumbers. They wanted all these different things. And so He says, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give it to you until you can't stand it anymore. I'm not here to be political, but I think I'm in an okay place that I can kind of say what's on my mind, okay? All right. Considering 8 years ago, there were many people in this country, a lot of people in this country that wanted change. I think we got it. And how is it working out for you? Well, you know what? We haven't learned our lesson, apparently. Because we're still clamoring for what we want. It's just a lot of people from a different perspective now are clamoring for that change. So, again, God will often give His people what they want to demonstrate what you want is not what you need. Because your flesh, your carnal nature, if you allow it to rise up, it will deceive you and it will lead you to things that render death. So He gives them these things. He says in verse 19, you'll not eat not 1 day, not 2, not 5 days, nor 10, nor 20, but for a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you because, here's the reason, you despise the Lord who is among you and have wept before Him saying, why did we ever come out of Egypt? In spite of everything that they've seen, including a sea being divided so that they could walk through on dry land and their pursuers being swallowed up in that sea. Besides seeing the deliverance of the Lord in the land of Egypt, all the things that they've experienced, I've never seen a body of water open up so that I can walk through on dry land. I mean, I would like to think that if I had experienced something like that, I would be true blue. But they're already beginning to reject and question what He is offering them because it does not appeal to them. We're not talking about the world here. We're talking about His people. So it goes on, it tells us that they really kind of voice this, we wish we'd never left Egypt. We want things back the way they were. We want to turn back and get back to the way it was. They overlook the mud pits and the bondage, but they think about the fresh fish and all these things. And so in verse 31, it tells us this. Numbers chapter 11. Now a wind went out from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea and left them fluttering near the camp about a day's journey on this side and about a day's journey on that side, all around the camp and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. And the people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day, gathering the quail. And it describes how much they gathered. Verse 33 says, but when the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. We all know the story. But the point is this. They wanted what they wanted. And because they wanted to get back to the way things used to be for them, what they were familiar with, that's what brought about this craving. And it's what opened the door for another people called the mixed multitude to be able to influence them to crave the same things. Now, I do also find it interesting that when they left Egypt, we understand that when they left, they did not leave one hoof behind. They came out with flocks. They came out with herds. They had a source of meat. And yet they're clamoring for meat. Now, here's Bill's opinion. What they were really saying is, we want Egypt's meat. We want what Egypt has to provide. Because the wind that brought the quail came from the direction of the sea, and I'll suggest to you that that was the same sea they had just crossed through, meaning the wind came from the direction of Egypt. Is it possible that the quail also came from Egypt? I'll just leave that as a question. But the point is very clear here. They didn't want what He was providing for them. They wanted what they wanted. And we have this tendency to do that. And we're not exempt from this. I mean, it'd be easy for us to look at that and say, well, if I had been there, I would have set them all straight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we live in a day and time you're going to get your chance to demonstrate that. You're going to get a chance to demonstrate whether or not we really mean these things. Look, I think it's easy to give up shrimp cocktails. I think it's easy to give up ham on Easter Sunday and wrapping Christmas presents in comparison to what the Creator is calling upon us to do in this day and time. Those things, in my view, although they are important, although those, we are not to eat unclean things, I get that. But I think Beyond that, what we are being shown as we walk through that particular commandment, for instance, is that if I can control my appetite for physical things, things that I can ingest, should I not learn to control my appetite for things that are far more deadly than a ham sandwich? Because you see, the things that are far more deadly are much more subtle. The adversary does not come in a red suit carrying a pitchfork. The adversary comes posing as an angel of light. In other words, passing himself off as something that is good in order to get us to ingest something that is going to kill us. We live in a day and time when, like I said, I believe that we're going to be given an opportunity to demonstrate whether or not we love God with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our strength. That's easy to say. If I polled everybody here and everybody that's watching, do you love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your strength? I'm sure every one of us would want to say, absolutely, yes. But He has a way of orchestrating events whereby we get to demonstrate whether or not that is true. He squeezes us. There was a man who said, and I'll paraphrase, if everybody else denies you, I'm not going to deny you. I'll die with you. And I really believe he meant that when he said it. But when he thought his life was on the line, when he thought that he might get imprisoned or worse, what did he do? The very thing he said he'd never do. What I'm getting at is I believe that most of us love God with a lot of our heart, a lot of our soul, and a lot of our strength. But the commandment is to love Him with all our heart. And so you know how He brings us to that place? He squeezes us. He subjects us to intense pressure. You know, we're called living stones in Peter's first letter, in chapter 2. We're called living stones, that we are to come to the Messiah as to a living stone because we are living stones being built up into a spiritual house. And most of you probably know that stones are formed because the sand and silica is subjected to intense pressure and heat. And being subjected to this pressure and this heat, these little sand particles fuse together and they become stone. But I think that we're more than just regular common stones if we're His people. In fact, in Exodus 19, He says to Moses and to the children of Israel, you saw what I did unto the Egyptians and how I bore you unto myself upon eagle's wings. Now, if you will indeed hear my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all peoples, for all the earth is mine, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That Hebrew word that is translated peculiar treasure can be rendered jewels. Jewels, precious stones, not just common stones, but precious stones. Similar to those stones that adorned the breastplate of the high priest. Do you know how those stones are formed? By even more pressure, even more heat. I've been thinking about that a lot the last couple of years when I see the heathen seemingly prospering and me being squeezed and wondering, how is it that he's living on easy street and we're struggling in whatever way? And I see a lot of nodding heads out here in the audience, and I guess that means this is resonating with some of you, that you feel the same thing. Well, the reason that it seems that he's prospering and we're being squeezed is because He is shaping us. And He's wanting to mold us into the people that He has called us to be. If we're living in the time that we believe that we're living in, folks, it means this, or at least this is how it translates in my brain. Yeshua said that those days would be unlike anything the world had ever seen before or will ever see again. And because He has always worked through people, not perfect people that He has chosen, but He perfects those that He has chosen. Because He's always working through people, if we're living in that time, then might it be that It's time for there to be a people unlike anything the world has ever seen or will ever see again. And if we're living in that time, that means that you and I got picked. He didn't pick Moses for this time. Moses was for that generation. He didn't pick David for this time. He chose David for that generation because that generation needed a David or an Isaiah or an Ezekiel or a Haggai or a Paul or a Peter, what have you. But no, He didn't choose any of those to come into the kingdom here. He chose you and me to come into the kingdom for such a time as this. And so I'm recommending to you that we are being squeezed. We are being pressed. We are being subjected to intense heat and pressure, not to destroy us, but to shape us and to mold us into people that He's called us to be. And that means, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to be on guard, that we are not seduced by the cravings of the mixed multitude. We must not be seduced by our wants, what we think is good, what we think would be best, because oftentimes what we want, even though He may give it to us, is not what we needed. We live in a day and time that, in this state, as a matter of fact, this has been kind of been out in the front in the news. We live in times when a man who thinks he's a woman has been given opportunity to go in the ladies' room. And so there are some people who decided, well, we're going to initiate some legislation. We're going to make a law that says if you have that which pertains to a man, then you should go in the men's room. Amen. And if you have that which pertains to a woman, you should go in the women's room. All right, now, I grew up in South Georgia, and there, that's just common sense. Didn't require a lot of thinking it through. That was just common sense. But we live in a day and time when common sense has been replaced with nonsense. Several months ago, I read how that the President of the United States, the leader of the free world, arguably the most powerful man on earth, assigned or appointed a man who thinks he's a woman to a presidential advisory council on faith-based issues. Let me say it again. He appointed a man who dresses as a woman, who acts as a woman, lives as a woman. He appointed him to advise the leader of the free world on faith-based issues. Did you hear about this? Look it up. And if you can, find a picture of him and you'll discover, as I did, this fellow should have stayed a man. Because he's an ugly, ugly woman. All right. But the world has gone crazy. The world is topsy-turvy. And so let's read something in Isaiah that addresses the issue. Verse 20 of Isaiah chapter 5. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. Amen. Now, if that doesn't describe today, I don't know what does. Would you agree? Would you agree that we live in a time when people are calling good evil and evil good and exchanging light for... Okay. All right, we have a consensus. For those of you who are watching there, everybody in here is nodding their heads in agreement. Now, let's continue to read. Let's go to verse 24. Therefore, as the fire devours the stubble and the flame consumes the chaff, so their root will be as rottenness and their blossom will ascend like dust, because they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the word of the Holy One of Israel. That's easy to see, isn't it? Therefore, the anger of the Lord is aroused against His people. Now, wait a minute. Because when we read, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, you weren't thinking about His people, were you? You were thinking about those people, weren't you? But He doesn't say His anger is aroused against those people. but against His people. In other words, His people are calling evil good and good evil, are exchanging light for darkness, etc. In fact, the context of Isaiah 5 is He calls His people a vineyard. He plants a vineyard. He builds a wall. He does everything that's needed for this vineyard to produce good grapes. But when He goes out to find grapes, He finds not good grapes, but bitter grapes. And so He begins to talk to His people. You see, if His anger was solely for those people, it might say, if those people who deny that I exist and who scoff at my word, if they would humble themselves, seek my face and pray, and if they would turn from their wicked ways, then I would do certain things. But it doesn't say that, does it? It says, if my people, which are called by my name, if they will humble themselves, seek my face and pray, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. Now, I realize that that was in response to Solomon's prayer when he dedicated the temple. But if you'll allow me to be so bold as to say that I believe that the principle remains for all of His people, wherever they may be. Amen. I'm one of those people that believe that the nation that you and I live in, or I'm assuming Americans are what we have here, and I know that there's people watching internationally, but if you were raised in America, if you're like me, then you believe that God raised this nation up for a purpose. I believe that with my whole heart. I believe that when people like John Winthrop wrote of the fact that he believed that they were to be a city set upon a hill, a shining city upon a hill, he took that idea from what Yeshua said in the Gospel of Matthew, and that he, and along with others, believed that God had reaffirmed that He was indeed willing to come into covenant with them, and that if they would follow His instructions and live righteously, that He would bless them, that He would honor that, and He would city set upon a hill, so to speak. Now, I know that this country has had a lot of warts and flaws, but I'm grateful that the Creator saw fit for me to be born and raised here. And so growing up in this country, I've come to appreciate a certain mindset, at least how it used to be, and a certain lifestyle. Well, at least how it used to be. And so over the last several years, I'm sure like me, you've seen that go the other direction. And though it didn't start overnight, it just seems we're on this accelerated path to turning farther and farther and farther away from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm not saying that those framers and founders of this nation were perfect men. They weren't. They were imperfect men. But I do believe that in general, they believed in the perfect principles that were contained in this, what we call the Bible. Amen. All right? But we have forgotten that. We've rejected that. We've turned away from it. And, well, let's put it this way. How many of you believe that this nation is sick? We believe that this nation is sick, which means this nation needs to be healed, right? And according to what I understand from what he said, if a nation is going to be healed, if that's going to happen, no candidate is going to do it. No political party is going to do it. No political philosophy is going to bring that about. I don't care if it's the guy who wears the red hat who says, let's make America great again, or if it's she who shall not be mentioned. America is not going to be great again until or if Americans turn back to the one who is great. All right? Now, let me say something here. We also might have to entertain this possibility. Making America great again is not what the Father is offering right now. That might not be on His agenda. It might be something else. It might be that we're living in the times of the restoration of all things. It might be that we're living in the time that the kingdom is being restored to Israel. It might be that we're living in the time when we are anticipating the Messiah ruling and reigning, not from Washington, D.C., but from Jerusalem. All right? So I think it's important to at least consider that what I want might not be what I need. And so I cannot be seduced by the mixed multitude, so to speak. And that if we do this, and if we do that, and if we build this, and if we put this person in power, then we can turn this thing around. Let's find somebody who's head and shoulders above everybody else. Let's find a strong man. Let's find someone who's going to do this and do that and say all the things that I wish I had a platform to say. No person is going to save this nation. It's impossible. If this nation is to be healed, it will only be because my people, which are called by my name, humble themselves, seek my face and pray, and turn from their wicked ways. What these people out here are doing, ladies and gentlemen, and the reason it has grown to be so egregious and the reason it's intensified and grown in frequency is not so have changed out there as much as we have changed. Because His anger is not aroused against those people. His anger is aroused against His people. Because His people first exchanged light for darkness, called evil good and good evil, and made compromises and allowed the little foxes to come in. We are now in the time and the place that there are churches that welcome things that this book says, don't do that, don't eat with them, don't fellowship with them, but because we have our, let me get off of that. I will. But let's do something else here. I've got just a few minutes left in this segment. And this is kind of the introduction to what I want to share later on this afternoon. But I'm going to leave you with this idea. Again, it's easy for us as God's people to, when we read this book and hear what He says, to deflect the impact of His Word from us and project it out onto everybody else. He's getting ready to judge them. Okay, He's getting ready to judge. I don't doubt that at all. But again, if He's getting ready to judge them soon, how much sooner is He judging His house? And so there comes a time, I believe, that we have to stop pointing fingers at everybody else and start really taking a good look on the inside right here. So I'm going to read to you from Daniel chapter 9. And the reason I wanted to read this is because, first, as far as we know, Daniel was an upright man. He was a righteous man. There's nothing recorded that I can see where he's, a compromiser. I mean, we're talking about a man who, along with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that are known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, these men and many others saw their nation destroyed. Oh, remember Jeremiah, right? The prophet who went about trying to compel God's people to turn back to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to turn back to His instructions, to His commandments. And those people just scoffed at him, ended up throwing him in prison. In fact, prison was kind of a safe place for him to be when the destruction came. All right, but Daniel and these other men, they saw their nation crumbling right before their eyes. They saw the city of Jerusalem destroyed and besieged. They saw the temple destroyed and consequently were, along with many others, taken off into captivity. They suffered those things right along with everybody else. And they were led into captivity. And of course, in Daniel chapter 1, we're told that the Lord is the one who delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And understand, and I realize this group does, but Babylon is the epitome of everything that God despises. That's right. That's right. But because His people had called evil good and good evil, had exchanged light for darkness, etc., He allowed those that they were to be a light to rule over them. I want you to imagine in your mind, if you will, picture a globe. Can you do that for me? Picture a globe in your mind. Now, find Israel. Find the land of Israel. Where is it? It's not in some far remote corner of the globe, is it? But no, it's in the middle of the globe. Interestingly, bordered on the west by the Mediterranean Sea, Mediterranean being a word that means Middle Earth. He put them in the midst of the earth. Now, in your mind's eye, zoom in a little closer. You see Israel? You see the land there? Now look at the neighborhood. The cardinal rule of real estate is what? Location, location, location. And who picked this spot? The Creator of the universe. And why? Because His people are called to be a light in the midst of darkness. He wanted them to be a light to those nations that surrounded Him. But every time they ceased from doing that and began to act like the nations instead of being a light to them, He allowed those very nations to rule over them. Does it seem to anyone else besides me that the wicked seem to have the upper hand in attempting to rule over God's people? Does it seem that way to you? Then why? Because at some point in time, at large, we ceased being a light to the nations and started acting like the nations. And in Daniel's day, as a consequence of that, Jerusalem was destroyed, the temple was destroyed, many of the temple treasures were carted off into Babylon and placed in the house of Nebuchadnezzar's idol, God, along with the people of Judah, including Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who were then, along with others of the men of Judah, taken into Nebuchadnezzar's academy to learn the way of the Chaldeans, their language, their culture, etc. And you know the story, how those four men, because purposed in their heart that they would not defile themselves. I mean, you think about that. Their nation's already destroyed. They're already in captivity. And still, they purposed in their heart that they would not defile themselves by eating the king's delicacies and drinking his wine. And you know the story, how they basically were rewarded for that. And Nebuchadnezzar came to see them as very important to his government. They ended up working for the Babylonian government. Daniel sat in the gate. But as the story goes, we see that Daniel is served Nebuchadnezzar, he serves others. But in chapter 9, he does this. Verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the lineage of the Medes, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by the books the number of years specified by the word of the Lord through Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. And so he's reading the book of Jeremiah, and he comes to understand some things, or to reacquaint himself with some things, it may have been. Nevertheless, he said, I set my face toward the Lord God to make requests by prayer and supplications with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. And I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession and said, O Lord, great and awesome God, who keeps His covenant and mercy with those who love Him and with those who keep His commandments, we have sinned and committed iniquity. We have done wickedly and rebelled, even by departing from your precepts and your judgments. Neither have we heeded your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, to our princes, to our fathers, and all the people of the land. O Lord, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face as it is this day to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and all Israel, those near and those far off in all the countries to which you have driven them because of the unfaithfulness which we have committed against you. O Lord, to us belongs shame of face, to our kings, our princes, our fathers, because we have sinned against you. To the Lord our God belong mercy and forgiveness, though we have rebelled against Him. We have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in His laws, which He set before us by His servants and His prophets. Yes, all Israel has transgressed your law and is departed so as not to obey your voice. Therefore the curse, by the way, that's pronounced Allah in Hebrew. Therefore the curse and the oath written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out upon us because we have sinned against Him. Here's my point. This righteous man, this man who, along with others, purposed in his heart he would not defile himself by taking and eating things that had been presumably sacrificed unto idols, and he wouldn't defile himself with the king's delicacies. A man that we have no reason to believe that he was anything other than upright. Never once in all of that says, because they sinned against you. He said, because we have sinned against you. And so it seems to me that there comes a point in time that I believe that the Creator deals with us. He deals with us as individuals and families, but I also believe that He deals with the nation. And there comes a point in a time that we have to take our responsibility. We have to embrace our responsibility in what is happening overall. I'm not saying that I'm to blame for what Joe Average does. If he thinks he's a man, or he's a man, he thinks he's a woman, he's going to go into a woman's. No, I'm not saying that. But I did have a part in the environment that came about, that he felt that it was okay to pursue those kinds of things, that he thought he could get away with that. I participated at some point in time in compromising. I'm not the only one. There comes a point in time that not only do we have to be responsible as an individual, but we have to take responsibility as a nation. All right, so here's where I'm going with this. I don't know what's going to become of this nation, the United States of America. I mean, ultimately, yes, I do. There comes a day and a time when the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our God and of His Messiah. And no one was exempted from that. The Torah shall go forth from Jerusalem, the word of the Lord from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. I understand that. The United States of America was not raised up to be the eternal superpower. It will give way. It will decrease as He restores the kingdom to Israel. Right? Ultimately, I know that. We know that. But I can't say I know absolutely for sure what it is He's wanting to do with this nation right now. I don't know that He wants to restore it. I don't know that He wants to just let it fall apart. I don't know. I don't know. I don't claim to have that kind of information. But if He wants to heal this land, it will not be through a candidate. It will not be through a political party. It will not be through a political philosophy. The guy in the red hat and that other person is not going to save this nation. Come November, if we go into that polling station, if you're going to participate in the process, and by the way, I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying if you're going to participate in the process, you're going to go to that polling station. If you're like me, you're going to go into the booth, and that old familiar feeling is going to come on upon you. Which is the lesser of two evils? May I suggest that kind of thinking and justifying that kind of thinking is what has got us to this point in the first place. Because it's trying to decide, as it were, which side of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil do I wish to eat from? The left side or the right side? And at the end of the day, the left or the right still renders death. I'm 53 years old, and for most of my life, until the last several years, was pretty active in the political process. I grew up in a home where my dad, we won't get into that too much, but let's just say that he was very involved in the political scene and had a very, very strong political opinion. Well, that rubbed off on me some. I can remember political election cycles all the way back to 1968 and that presidential election cycle. And the reason is because my dad was involved to a large degree with certain candidates. But I have to say that in my short 53 years, this is the strangest, the most bizarre political cycle that I remember. And there's a lot of nodding heads out there. It's bizarre, is it not? Yes. Now, is it bizarre just because it's just one of those things that happen every now and then? Or is it bizarre because it is a reflection of the culture? It is a reflection of what we as a nation have become. And so it's almost as if, in allowing it to unfold this way, the Creator is speaking to His people and saying, is this what you want? Because if this is what you want, maybe He's willing to let us have it. But what we want is not what we most often need. So instead of looking to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, instead of going and thinking, boy, back then we had this, we had that, and pining for what things used to be, and then justifying a position that winks at this and ignores that. I mean, where in Scripture are we given a latitude to embrace and endorse wickedness if we can defeat evil? Do you understand what I just asked you? Yeah. Where are we given the latitude? Because we're in a war against evil, we're going to endorse wickedness. I don't think it works that way. And so what must we do? Again, I don't know what is to befall this nation, if God's purposes have played out or not, I don't know. But if this land is to be healed, it will not be because of what those people out there do or not do. It will be because of what His people do. If we humble ourselves, if we seek His face and pray and turn from our wicked ways, He said that He would do certain things. But I'll leave you with this thought. David had a child by Bathsheba, and the child was sickly. And so David prayed. He didn't eat, and he prayed, and he prayed, and he prayed. Until finally the word came that the child was dead. So he got up, and he washed himself, he went and he ate. Basically saying, well, the Lord's made His decision. I can't see the child now, but I'll go to where he is one day. God had made His decision. But up until that time, he sought the Lord. He prayed. He appealed to heaven. And God answered. But then I'm also reminded that there was a king, and Isaiah went in to talk to Hezekiah one day and said, get your house in order, you're about to die. And the king turned his face to the wall and he began to pray and he began to appeal to heaven. And before the prophet could make it back out into the street, he was told to go back and tell Hezekiah, I've heard his prayers, and I'm going to answer his prayers by giving him 15 years, adding it to his life. You understand what I'm trying to get across here? We don't know what He is going to do specifically in a lot of cases, but we'll never know if we don't go to our knees in humility and prayer, seeking His face and turning from our wicked ways. Amen?